Do you believe they have a case?
You and Dawson, you both live in the same dream world. It doesn't matter what I believe. It only matters what I can prove. So please, don't tell me what I know and don't know I know the law.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Whenever we get into legal technicalities in true crime, as we seem to be doing both in the Alec Baldwin case now and the Barry Morphew case, the words of Tom Cruise's callow plea bargaining Lieutenant Daniel Caffey come to mind. He says, "It only matters what I can prove, so don't tell me what I know or don't know. I know the law." But the law isn't only about what you can prove, it's also about jurisdictions, protocols, and loopholes. Knowing the law and knowing your case is one thing, but there's also knowing how to use the law to avoid going to trial. When we look at the timeline for the past 2 months in the Baldwin case, we see that on January 25th, Alec Baldwin argued that Mamie Mitchell's lawsuit should be dismissed. Mamie Mitchell was, I think, the second lawsuit to arise out of the Rust shooting, and it did so in November. Baldwin went on to ABC News to give his exclusive in early December. According to The Hollywood Reporter, Baldwin's response to Mamie Mitchell's suit was, quote, "Plaintiff alleges facts suggestive of negligence, in other words, a claim exclusively subject to New Mexico's workers' compensation system, but not assault," and that it was written by the attorney Aaron Dyer of Pillsbury, Winthrop, Shaw, Pittman in the Demurrer. According to The Hollywood Reporter, Baldwin also alleged that Mitchell, this is via his attorney obviously, she had no apparent physical injury, and in their words, in the words of the Demurrer, quote, "raced to the courthouse in California without providing the notice in New Mexico required for a workers' compensation claim, apparently to get her claim in front of any potential claims by the two individuals who were hit by the live round," end quote. Now, although I studied commercial law, criminal law, and family law, and I know something about legal domicile, I have to acknowledge civil suits going into the area of wrongful death, etc., isn't something I'm terribly familiar with. But generally, we can use the reasonable man test in order to determine if there's a case or not. Nevertheless, in law, it's all too easy not to see the woods for the trees, to get so bogged down in the details that the larger legal questions are overlooked. In the Baldwin case, just as in the case handled in the movie A Few Good Men, that larger legal question is whether Baldwin's piggy bank is even legally up for grabs or not. In the movie A Few Good Men, they had to kind of think out of the box to something completely different, a code red, something that was going to make the case or break the case. And I wonder whether the recent timeline doesn't provide some clues as to what is really going on in terms of those woods, those trees. But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. Right, so just 10 or 11 days, less than 2 weeks after directing the script supervisor to pursue workers' compensation, on the exact same day, Elena's husband filed a wrongful death suit. That was February 15th. Baldwin purchased a farm and a farmhouse in Vermont for $1.75 million. Was this a coincidence? Suffice it to say, Hutchins's suit seems to have some real teeth and could conceivably cost the actor millions. Now consider this. Less than 4 months after the Rust incident, and despite jet-setting to do a role for a low-budget flick in the UK, and despite living happily for years in New York, Baldwin was also house hunting during this period. Although the home has been described as massive and lavish, it's a drop in the ocean compared to his other properties. For example, his massive apartment spread in Greenwich Village is worth $16 million. That's around 8 times as much as the Vermont spread. According to the New York Post, quote, "Built in 1792, the 18th century home that Baldwin has now purchased comes with a tavern room with a fireplace, a sauna, and a picturesque red dairy barn. It was last sold in November 2014 for just over $500,000, so it's appreciated appreciably in value over the last 8 years or so. And it was sold in November 2014 when the home went into foreclosure. In the days following, Helena's husband seemed to go on the warpath, accusing the actor directly, among other statements that he made. Baldwin was fairly measured in his response when he posted a cryptic note, well, a cryptic quote about lying, quoting something about Buddhism. And that was also on the same or the day following the Today Show interview. When the New York Post covered Baldwin's acquisition of the Vermont farmstead, they perhaps coyly hinted the following, quote, "It is unclear why the Baldwins chose to call Arlington their new home in a town with a current population of 2,457. Then they also added, quote, "Meanwhile, Baldwin has been privately shopping his Greenwich Village triplex that he purchased between 2011 and 2019, worth more than 16 million since the pandemic." And they then sort of put a link to an article. Alec Baldwin is hush hush shopping his village penthouse. But that article, however, predates the Rush shooting by about 3 months. I think it's dated July 2020. So what do you think? Is it a pure coincidence that Baldwin bought a farm and home in Vermont, a homestead state with homestead laws, when he did? Or is this similar to OJ moving to Florida to avoid the civil liabilities from his trial? A homestead state prohibits creditors from forcing individuals who are resident there from selling their homesteads in order to pay back debts. According to an article published February 25th by Showbiz 411, quote, "Now Alec has suddenly taken an interest in Vermont. Yes, his wife Hilaria's grandparents lived there for years. Yes, Hilaria drove there right after the shooting, loaded up the SUV with her kids and told an interviewer she drove there without a purpose. It was a total fluke, but maybe not." Baldwin has a lot to protect financially. This is according to this article in Showbiz 411. He's made millions from 30 Rock and real estate investments. He's earned a tidy sum hosting the match game on ABC and shilling for Capital One. If the Hutchins lawsuits turns into something more, and he says it's hard to believe there are criminal charges from the Rush shooting, New England, a place in which he spent no time in his life, may be a financial refuge. I've no doubt Baldwin has read up on how to protect your income and property on Vermont's legal help website. I'll bet Hutchins's lawyers, and Hutchins himself is a lawyer, have too. That's the end of the quoted section. So the first thing to say is something I suggested in my recent analysis of the Morphew case. If you're seeing an effort to avoid trial, does that mean someone is worried they wouldn't win if they went to trial? Whatever happens, I think it will be interesting to see whether Baldwin can firstly protect his assets and secondly, whether he can maintain the fan base he's already generated, assuming most or all of the legal efforts to gain some kind of restitution are foiled by this move. OJ achieved the former, but I'm not sure he succeeded in terms of the latter. There's also one more person who has yet to play their card now that Hutchins has made his intentions known. Will the director, Joel Souza, who was also seriously injured, do anything in the legal sense? To conclude, in A Few Good Men, a case that is destined not to go to trial suddenly does. The callow lawyer suddenly sees the legal woods for what they are. This is prior to the trial, and decides he does, and the case does, need to see the inside of a courtroom. Will any of the Rush suits play out in court? What do you think?
Why does a lieutenant junior grade with 9 months experience and a track record for plea bargaining get assigned a murder case? Would it be so that it never sees the inside of a courtroom?